The first nanny quit before breakfast was even cleared from the table. The second left crying before noon. The third never made it past the locked playroom door where 3 voices shrieked like wild birds. It became a running joke among the staff. No nanny lasted a single day with the Millionaire's triplets. And yet, when a worn-out single mom with a duct-taped stroller and coins jingling in her pocket came knocking on the mansion door, no one laughed. They stared, because she wasn't the type to belong in that marble-floored world, and still, something in her eyes said she wasn't turning back. Her name was Rachel. She was 29, pale from skipping too many meals, her once thick hair tied into a limp ponytail. Her jeans were faded, frayed at the knees, and her shoes had worn through soles that let in the damp September air. The last grocery trip had ended with her daughter, Lily, counting out pennies at the self-checkout, cheeks burning as the machine beeped for every coin. Their apartment fridge rattled like an old man wheezing, holding nothing but 2 eggs and a half-used ketchup bottle. She'd walked past the eviction notice curling on their door that morning without daring to pull it off. Still, Rachel's posture was upright as she crossed the iron-gated driveway. Dignity. She clung to it like breath. Inside the mansion, polished shoes clicked against marble, chandeliers spilled warm light, and a maid in a black dress and white apron eyed Rachel's thrift store coat. "You're here for the position?" she asked with disbelief tugging at her lips. "Yes," Rachel said, smoothing her coat through the lining had come loose. Her throat tightened, but she held the woman's gaze. "For the nanny job." The maid hesitated, then led her toward a wide glass door that opened into chaos. 3 children, all about 6 years old, darted across the room. A boy was smearing paint on the wall, another was climbing onto the piano, and a little girl was pulling feathers from a pillow like a tiny hurricane. The maid muttered, "Good luck," and quickly retreated. Rachel knelt, setting her daughter's duct-taped backpack down. Lily clung shyly behind her, big brown eyes flicking from the wild triplets to the tall windows that overlooked a pristine garden. The difference between their lives was unbearable in that instant. Rachel felt it like a crack in her chest. "Hi," Rachel said softly to the children. No command, no scolding, just her voice, calm and steady. "My name is Rachel. This is Lily. We're visiting." The triplets froze, suspicious, as if this newcomer didn't know the rules of their kingdom. For a heartbeat silence. Then the boy on the piano giggled, and it tumbled into laughter from the others. Something had shifted. From the balcony above, a man's deep voice carried down. "You're still here?" His tone was dry, almost amused. Ethan Hale, the millionaire father, descended the curved staircase. Tall, dark-haired, his black shirt tucked neatly into tailored jeans, he had the kind of polished presence that turned heads even in silence. But his jaw was tense, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Most nannies don't last the first 10 minutes. Rachel rose slowly. "Maybe they've been treated like problems instead of people," she said, surprising even herself with the boldness of it. Lily squeezed her hand in secret approval. His brow lifted. He studied her, a woman with scuffed shoes daring to stand in his immaculate home. Something in her weary confidence unsettled him. He nodded curtly. "Try one day. If you make it to dinner, you'll be the first." As hours passed, the triplets tested her. They spilled juice across silk rugs, screamed when asked to eat, hid under tables. But instead of shouting, Rachel crouched to their level, her eyes steady. She coaxed them with stories, with gentle firmness. At one point, when the little girl threw a toy across the room, Rachel caught it mid-air and simply said, "We only throw things we're willing to lose." The child blinked, sat down, and for the first time that day, was quiet. "Rehook here," the moment Ethan noticed. At the 3-hour mark, he passed the doorway and froze. The 3 terrors were sitting in a circle with Lily, quietly drawing on scrap paper Rachel had pulled from her own bag. No chaos, just children. He leaned against the frame, his disbelief softening into something almost like hope, but hope had its price. Late afternoon, Rachel slipped into the kitchen to warm milk. She saw the stocked fridge, rows of fruit, cheeses, wine bottles gleaming, and her throat tightened with sudden shame. She thought of her own empty shelves. The contrast crushed her, yet she forced herself back into the playroom with a smile, hiding the storm inside. Evening fell. The triplets were bathed and in pajamas, tucked into beds they fought sleep in, but eventually surrendered to. Rachel kissed Lily's forehead as she curled on a couch corner with a borrowed blanket. For the first time in months, Rachel felt a fragile sense of safety. Then Ethan appeared at the doorway again, this time with 2 glasses of water in hand. His gaze held curiosity, even respect. "You lasted," he said quietly. "No one ever does." Her lips trembled with the weight of it all. "Because I can't afford to fail," she whispered. She didn't mean to say it aloud, but the truth slipped free. Ethan's eyes sharpened, noticing the flicker of fear she tried to mask. He stepped closer, voice low. "What do you mean by that?" Rachel swallowed, heart pounding. Should she admit it? The eviction notice, the fridge with nothing left, the pennies on the counter. Her silence stretched, fragile, while Lily stirred in her sleep, her tiny hand clinging to the frayed strap of her backpack. Rachel's dignity warred with her desperation, and in that moment, Ethan's gaze demanded an answer she wasn't ready to give. Rachel lowered her eyes, her throat tightening as if words would betray her dignity. Ethan didn't push. He set the glass of water on the table and lingered, watching the way her hands trembled when she smoothed Lily's blanket. He'd seen hundreds of women step into his house, nannies with degrees, polished smiles, promises of discipline, but never a woman like her, carrying both weariness and fire, both shame and courage, and never one who, instead of controlling his children, had somehow tamed them with patience he himself had lost years ago. The next morning, the mansion stirred awake with the usual clang of staff moving briskly through corridors. Yet the playroom was quiet, almost peaceful. Rachel was on the carpet with the triplets, showing them how to fold paper boats from old magazines. Lily watched from the couch, her eyes lighting up each time her mother's laughter escaped unguarded. Ethan stood by the door, arms crossed, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. The sound of laughter in his home was something he hadn't realized he'd missed. His wife had passed 3 years earlier, and though he never spoke of it, the silence had weighed heavier than the marble walls surrounding him. He interrupted gently. "Rachel, can I speak to you for a moment?" She looked up, guarded again, smoothing her hair back as if preparing for judgment. He gestured toward his office. Inside, the room glowed with warm oak shelves and the faint aroma of expensive coffee. Ethan leaned on his desk, his confidence crisp, yet his tone softer than the night before. "I need honesty. Why did you take this job? Really?" Her lips parted, then closed again. The truth sat heavy, shameful. But Lily's shoes were already falling apart, and winter was coming. Rachel exhaled slowly. "Because we're about to lose our home. Because I can't even afford milk some days. Because every time I look at my daughter, I wonder how much longer I can pretend things are okay." She blinked rapidly, holding back tears. "But I wasn't lying about the kids. I took this job for her, yes, but I also stayed because they don't scare me. They're just lonely." Her voice cracked at the end, but she lifted her chin, refusing pity. Ethan's throat tightened, his hand brushing across his jaw in thought. He wasn't used to people speaking so plainly around him. It felt disarming, real. That evening, when the staff gathered near the kitchen whispering about how long this one would last, Ethan walked in and silenced them with a look. "She's staying," he said simply. "She's different." Days passed, and the mansion changed in subtle ways. The triplets no longer shattered glasses just to watch them break. They began waiting at the door when Rachel arrived each morning, tugging her hands to pull her into their games. Lily, shy at first, became their shadow, running through hallways, her laughter mingling with theirs. And Ethan, he found himself drawn more often to the playroom than the boardroom. He'd pause at the threshold, caught by the image of Rachel, her ponytail messy but her smile radiant, guiding his children with patience that felt like light in a house long dim, but hardship followed Rachel like a shadow. One afternoon, a neighbor from her crumbling apartment called. Her landlord had thrown their things into the hallway. Rachel rushed there after work, finding Lily's few toys scattered, the eviction notice nailed cruelly to the door. She gathered what she could into the duct-taped stroller, her hands trembling as rain began to fall. Lily clutched her mother's arm, whispering, "Where will we go now?" That night, Rachel sat on a bus stop bench with their bags piled around them. The street lamp above flickered, casting her weary face in pale gold. She was too proud to call Ethan, too proud to admit she had nowhere left. But pride doesn't shield a child from cold. And when the rain seeped through Lily's shoes, Rachel broke. She dialed his number with shaking fingers. Within 30 minutes, headlights swept across the deserted street. Ethan stepped out, his black coat catching the rain, his expression unreadable but urgent. He didn't speak at first. He simply lifted the heavier bags into his car, then looked at Rachel, her soaked hair clinging to her face, her lips trembling though she tried to hide it. Finally, he said quietly, "You should have told me sooner." Rachel's defenses cracked. "I didn't want pity," she whispered. "I wanted a chance." Ethan's jaw flexed, his voice steady. "This isn't pity. It's respect. You've given my children what no one else could. Let me give you what you need in return." He opened the car door for Lily, who climbed in with tired trust. Rachel hesitated, her dignity battling her desperation. Then she exhaled and slid in too. The drive back to the mansion was silent, broken only by the hum of the engine. When they arrived, Ethan led them not to a guest room, but to a small sunlit wing of the house that had sat unused since his wife's passing. "It's yours," he said simply. "As long as you need." Rachel's eyes widened, her hand covering her mouth. "I can't accept this." "You can," he countered firmly. "Because you're not just a nanny anymore. You're family." His voice softened, almost breaking. "And you've reminded me of something I thought I'd lost. That people can still bring light into this house." Tears spilled down Rachel's cheeks, not from weakness, but release. Lily wrapped her arms around her mother's waist, whispering, "We're safe now." For the first time in years, Rachel allowed herself to believe it. Weeks turned into months, and the mansion was no longer a museum of wealth, but a home of laughter. Rachel walked its halls not as an outsider, but as someone who belonged. Ethan often found himself watching her resilience, her grace carved from hardship, and knew his children weren't the only ones she'd saved. The moral settled quietly in their lives. That one act of generosity, a chance, a room a hand outstretched can reroute a future. And sometimes, the people who seem to have nothing left to give are the ones who bring back the greatest abundance.